And we're here with Conor Ryan. Conor, what is up?
Nothing much, man. What's going on with you?
How about that Patriots game last night?
I don't know. Instant classic. It's one of
Was instant classic.
I feel like it's one of those ones where, like no one was really super mad at the end of it. It was like when they almost came back against the Niners when they were nasty in like 2012, whatever that one was. Everyone's just like, what are you gonna do? Like Cam Newton looks really damn good, so
What's funny is that's the first loss you felt good about. First Patriots loss you felt good about in forever. I mean, I don't remember the feeling of having a loss in week 2 for the Patriots and then being like, oh,
yeah.
they're gonna be all right. Like it never.
To be
But now it
fair,
does.
it feels fine right now, but uh, you know, we'll wait till the radio, personalities come on and see what the narrative is after that. But I don't know how you really should be discouraged after a game like that.
Yeah, again, I mean, just to and for the Bruins listeners, I mean, I hope you watched the game. It was a great game, great game. It would have been nice to see them punch it in the final seconds, but can't have it all. The fact they even were in that position was pretty surprising, considering it felt like the game was over much earlier or in the midway through the fourth quarter. But anyways, great game over there. You can go follow all the Patriots coverage at Patriots on CLNS or Patriots Beat. You like that little plug I just kind of
Yeah, that was a
inserted
nice
right
little
in there?
segue there, man.
Nice segue.
Expert move.
Expert move. But I will say there's Bruins stuff to talk about. So instead of talking about, I wish we could be talking about a game right now. It would be very fun if we could be talking about an actual Bruins game right now. If we were a Stars beat or Lightning beat, we could do that. Game 2 is Monday night. So when you hear this, there will have been a second game. Stars are currently up 1-0 in that series. Surprisingly, but again, the Bruins won the first game of the Stanley Cup last year and then lost it. So winning game 1 does not mean everything, but the Stars looked pretty damn good, you would say, in game 1.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, it seems like it's more random guys kind of stepping up. I mean, if you told me at the beginning of the season, one, that the cup final would be being played in late September, I wouldn't believe you. But the fact that, the goal scorers for them, it was, just a bunch of random dudes or depth guys or, the old kid Verata is still, just going off this entire postseason when he only played, I think, 10 games during the regular season. So, I mean, it seems like that team's just, again, everyone's clicking at the right time, and Anton Hudobin's still red hot. I think he had 35 out of 36 saves. So it's a good formula for success.
They've been good, and it's been a fun series to watch, and I imagine it will continue to be a fun series to watch. But on the Bruins front, now you head towards the offseason. You head towards free agency. You head towards trades, which is always fun. It looks like this offseason could be that. We'll start with free agents. Alex Pietrangelo, late last week, the Blues come out, and then Pietrangelo confirmed the report that they were going to have him explore free agency. They were kind of like, dude, why don't you go somewhere else? Why don't you go explore free agency? And if you don't get anything there, maybe we can work something out. But he wants a lot. I think it was said he wanted like 9.4 a year.
Nine point, like at least 9.25. I think he compared it to like I think whatever maybe Yossi signed as his extension in Nashville. I think it was kind of the benchmark that he wants to kind of, or at least be around that level in terms of an annual value.
So what's funny is he's been a really dominant, good defenseman. I mean, Bruins fans saw that firsthand in that series last year. But consistently, I mean, he's been a good defenseman for them. This year with the scoring pace seems a little much. I think he had over 70 points. I don't know if that is something that's going to be sustainable because he's 30. So again, like we're seeing here with Torrey Krug, giving a 30-year-old defenseman a large contract like that doesn't usually always work out. But Pietrangelo's a captain. Pietrangelo's a good two-way guy. He's a good all-around defenseman. You need to win a cup. Do you hand the money to a guy like Pietrangelo? Do you kick the tires on a guy like Pietrangelo even?
I mean, I think maybe you could kick the tires on him. I just don't know how realistic it is to add a guy like him when you kind of look at where he fits in. And again, if a guy like Pietrangelo is available, you find a spot to fit him in if you have the money and the need for him. But when you kind of just look at his overall skill set and where he kind of fits in, because I believe he's a right shot defenseman, right?
Yes.
He's a right shot guy. So, I mean, there's that problem in terms of, you got McAvoy and Carlo there, and maybe it's a situation where you trade Carlo. If you're looking at acquiring maybe top 6 talent, maybe you trade him and then you sign a guy like Pietrangelo. But again, you're committing a whole bunch of money to a guy who's 30 years old, and the way he kind of projects, you still think you probably get really good value for 3-4 years, maybe, 3 years at the minimum in terms of being a legitimate, top pairing guy. But still, if you're going to be forking over, 9.5 million per year for a guy like that, I think there's probably other fits where you could either acquire maybe more of a, second pairing, 20 minutes a night guy for cheaper in terms of average annual value, or on the trade market, or, divert that money towards a top 6 guy. Cause I think that's more pressing than, maybe replacing a guy like Krug, who has his skills, but, as long as you get maybe a solid kind of, top 4, like, I'll toss out, like, let's just say like TJ Brody or someone like that, who's a solid kind of 2-way guy, probably cost you 5.5 million. Maybe that's maybe a little bit of a better deal in terms of, filling in that gap and then using those other resources to get a top 6 guy, rather than, signing Pietrangelo for big money. He'd be worth, over 2 million more than any other guy if he signs a $9.5 million contract here. And then you have to, fit in the other places where you're trading Carlo, who's still, a very, very strong shutdown guy, a guy who should still keep on getting better. Who's also on, a good contract right now. And I don't think he's going to break the bank when he signs a big deal next year. So it'd be like a luxury, I would say, if you wanted to fork over that money. But would it make the Bruins better? Yes. But I still think you look at all the other kind of fires they have to put out, it makes it kind of tough to make it a realistic thing. That's one of those ones where, like, you're playing NHL and you're doing like franchise mode and you sim through the off season, and then you look at, you're like, all right, well, I think we have a little bit of cap space, so maybe the team still looks good. And then, like, you look on it and it's like they've signed, you got Pietrangelo, and it's like, okay, we had the same group coming back. Like, I'll take it, but like, you can't sign anyone next year now.
Well, so here's the thing. If you did bring a guy like him on, I think you'd eventually have to trade someone like McAvoy, because McAvoy's the guy on D who's projected to get the most money. He's projected to get that big time deal whenever that happens. So I think he ultimately is the one that probably would have to get dealt, not someone like Carlo. I think Carlo you can keep because he would be less money. McAvoy would be the one who would have to go, because then he'd become your second pairing right shot defenseman. You're not going to pay all that for your second pairing right shot defenseman. But you're right. You're right. I mean, first of all, the Bruins have not had a good history of signing veterans from St. Louis.
Yeah, Blues captains, no.
Yes, not too great. But I don't think that would happen with Pietrangelo. I think he would be, as you said, good for 3, 4, maybe 5 years. After that, I think it's very thin. I will say this, though. I think this offseason is proving to be very vital for defensive free agents that are at the top of their game. In the sense of, you look at Krug, you look at Pietrangelo, 29, 30 years old, looking to get their first big, long deal. Big, Pietrangelo is making 6.5 a year right now, I believe, which for a guy like him is severely underpaid. But do you think we start to see these guys get their big contracts earlier? Like, because teams clearly don't want to pay 30-year-olds. They shouldn't, at least. Most teams don't. If Pietrangelo was 25, these would be huge sweepstakes. If Krug was 25, the Bruins would hand him the contract he wants, but he's 30. Do you think that in the next coming years, as we're seeing with goalies and not wanting to pay them, do you think we sort of see teams with defensemen and forwards say, we're going to pay you way earlier, and your big contract's going to come when you're 25, not when you're 30?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure teams would probably prefer that. And you look at just the state of the market and the way it's all set up now, you would think it probably is going to shift to that eventually. I think, as you said, it's probably, unfortunately, for a few of these guys who've worked harder and are due these big contracts. This is kind of, unfortunately, probably be a rude awakening for them, where, it's due in large part to the fact that, the cap is staying flat, and we don't know when that's going to jump up again, because, I don't think we're going to go into next offseason, expecting the cap to jump up to 84, 85 million. I think it's probably going to stay. I think it's probably going to stay, the same, if not maybe marginally a little bit more, because, they're waiting for the revenue to get back to what it was this year before everything went to shit. And I don't know when you're expecting that revenue to be that way, because, you're still waiting for Seattle to come, which will going to be next season, the year after. And you don't know when you're going to have fans in the stands, which is a huge hit on the revenue to the league. So I don't know, what teams are going to fork over, 8.5, 9.5 million this offseason to even a established great cup winning defenseman like Pietrangelo. Like, if he was 25, 26, yeah, of course. And I think, if you're a team like St. Louis, who had his rights back then, you would like to sign him to a big term deal back then. That's why I think, St. Louis being like, all right, well, we'll be here. Like, see what you get out there. Like, there's always, again, never, overlook the one dipshit dumb team that will hand out a contract that it shouldn't be doing. Like, look at Bobrovsky last year with Florida.
Yeah.
Like, there's always going to be that one dipshit team. But I think when you just look at just the way the market is now and just teams realizing that there's going to be a little bit of hardship ahead in terms of, you look at a team like Arizona. Arizona, you'd think would have the cap space to be a big player. They can't even friggin' pay off their own, the company that manages their arena. Like, I don't think they're going to be big players this offseason when you combine that with the fact that the revenue is going to be shot to shit for at least the first few months of next season. So, I think it's going to be something where I think not even, going to be defenseman. I think any forward, who's 28, 29, or, 29, 30, 31, the market's not going to be there, because I think teams have to be more cognizant of paying for future potential as opposed to, past performance. You just can't do it in the way the market is now.
Well, that's the issue. I mean, the steep decline guys see in their 30s is so great, and we've seen it so much in the past 5-6 years.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is that's when they want their big deal.
Yeah.
They want that those bad years are going to be in that long-term deal they want. Mm-hmm. Ovechkin's asking for a ton at 37. Now, granted, he deserves it. The Capitals should pay it. They learned that they should be paying their guys with Barry Trotz, but you never know there. Also, the Blues gave Justin Falk a huge D contract last year, which was really odd, and everyone was like, well, that means Pietrangelo's gone. Falk's not even that great.
No, the Blues, for winning a cup and for having actually like a pretty solid core to keep on building off of, did a absurd amount of dipshit moves during this past offseason that made no sense. So they literally just overthought it.
And now they can't re-sign their captain. So, I don't. Joe Haggerty tweeted that he wouldn't be surprised to see the Bruins kick tires on him. I probably would be surprised to see them really inquire, because I just don't think it's a huge fit. I think Pietrangelo is going to get money and go towards a team that needs that veteran leader defenseman. The Bruins don't need the veteran presence, and they don't need the long-termness of the deal. They don't need the money. If he wanted to come to Boston for a 3-year, $9 million deal, go crazy. But I think he wants 7-8 years. So that's not going to happen. The other defenseman, long-term, expensive defenseman. This is what the Bruins, I guess, are in on this offseason.
Yeah, apparently.
Oliver Ekman-Larsson. And this was reported that the Bruins were in on OEL last week in Elliot Friedman's 31 Thoughts. We both were against the deal. You wrote a piece about it. I tweeted it. This is not the deal. This is not the guy you want. But what if the Bruins were to get Oliver Ekman-Larsson? What would you give up, and what would happen to the rest of the roster?
Yeah, I think it'd be, in terms of a fit on the roster, it would be easier to accommodate him as opposed to Pietrangelo, where you get Pietrangelo. I think everyone's first thought would be, for me and you, would be, oh, that's pretty interesting. Oh shit, they have to get rid of Carlo or McAvoy or one of those guys. You're making your already busy offseason that much harder for yourself. Ekman-Larsson, if Krug walks, he can fill in either that the top pair or the second pair. I'd imagine he'd be a top pairing guy with McAvoy, which is a pretty good group to roll out together. But I think in terms of the cost, it all comes down to how much money Arizona is willing to eat on that contract, because that's the biggest issue there. If he was available for 6.5, $7 million even, I'd be much more intrigued. He's 29. The metrics for him seem like they're dipping a little bit, but I don't put any I don't put any stock in it, but I'm curious to see what he would do in a system outside of what Rick Tocchet and what they have in Arizona. Because holy shit, every time a talented playmaking guy goes to Arizona, their offense just dries up. So I'd be curious to see how he would do, in a place like Boston, where even he's not necessarily the number one guy. Charlie McAvoy could be, the Bruins' best defenseman, going into next year for the next 10 years, and if Ekman Larsson's a very, very, very good number two, that's that much better for him and for the Bruins. But I think it all comes down to that cost because, in fact, he got 7 years left on that contract.
Oh,
Yeah, $8.25 million a year. So you bring him in, he's already making $1 million more than David Krejci, who's the highest paid player. So I think you look at the cost, it would all come down to, if you acquired him and you took that entire huge ass contract off Arizona's books, considering how screwed they seem to be, the cost probably isn't awful. Like you're still giving up solid amount of guys, but if you want to work out a deal where Arizona eats 15% of it or something, and you're paying them $6.25 million or $6 million, it'd be better for the Bruins, but you also have to probably give up more prospects. So I think Arizona, obviously the fact that they lost a 2020 second round pick and they lost a 2021 first round pick because of their their violations with the draft and the scouting, or I forget which part of it is in terms of what the actual fine print is, but they lost the pick after doing some dipshit stuff. So they're obviously going to be looking at recouping picks. So maybe it's 2021 first. They probably want cost controlled guys. So, maybe it's a Bjork or something like that, who's only under contract for $1.6 million. So those are kind of the pieces that stand out, but the cost may not be too bad if you want to take in that whole contract. But if you're the Bruins, I don't know, you want to put that on your books for a guy who is 29, had a lot of really, really good years, but still a lot of risk. He's not like a slam dunk guy that you want to be giving $8.25 million a year to. 6.5, that'd be, at that point he's interesting enough and is a good fit enough with this team that you'd be willing to see how it works out. But 8.25, that's a lot.
I don't know how Arizona gets this contract off their books. I don't. I mean, I think you have to only, you have to eat some of it and let the team you trade him to eat, the majority, but you got to eat some of it because that deal does not look good. I mean, again, I don't mind the player. I think he's solid. I think he's good, but he's not worth that amount of money.
No.
And again, if he came to the Bruins and he's making 8.25, damn well in a few years when McAvoy has to negotiate his next big deal, to be like, if he's making 8.25, I'm making 9 or 10, because that's sort of the potential we see McAvoy hitting. So you screw yourself over with that. You screw yourself with the McAvoy negotiations. I don't think you want to touch this Oliver Ekman-Larsson deal, but I will say it's nice to see the Bruins in on some big trades. It's nice to see them kicking tires on making a legit big team-changing roster shakeup move. And so we'll get into that right now. That is the right move. That is the right, not the Ekman-Larsson, but being in on that, the right move. But I don't know who you would go. You need forwards. You need forwards for that because we both said on defense, you can go out and sign a Brendan Dillon, a TJ Brody, maybe a Travis Hamonic. I mean, he's a right shot defenseman, but you can go out and sign a cheaper top 4 mid-level defenseman. You don't have to give everything to a franchise defenseman per se.
Right.
On offense, top 6 guys. Who do you like, and what are they going to have to give up?
I mean, I think the one guy that I've always been, a big fan of in terms of, I wish they either went after him. And again, it depends on what the team who currently has his rights is willing to, give up the guy for. But I think a guy like Kyle Palmeri stands out as a, top 6 proven guy who is both, an proven offensive guy, a guy who I think could fit in next to either Bergeron or Krejci. And is also, fantastic defensively as well. He's not Mark Stone, but he's kind of Mark Stone light a little bit. That, I think he's underrated in terms of what the overall kind of package he brings out on the ice. Veteran guy, I think maybe 28, 29, maybe just turned 30, but still a good age that, he's going to be a free agent next year, but you've got this 1 year with him. So the cost might not be as bad if you're willing to give up, some draft capital or a couple of prospects. So I think he's a guy that would be at the top of my list in terms of being a guy that would just solve that top six problem, without having to get too, crazy in terms of, really uprooting the entire roster. I think you put in Palmeri, you feel a lot better about how you go into next year where you don't have to worry about either one of those two lines. You put him with Krejci, you're all set. You put Pasternak down with Krejci, you put him with Bergeron, you're all set. You got another great two-way guy up there. He's a guy that stands out. I think you look at a guy like Besser out in Vancouver. That's going to be fascinating to see what they do this offseason, because that team's core is stacked. Like, you look at Vancouver and how they're built. They're what Toronto has thought that we're going to get for like the last 5 years. It's just like that group has worked so much better. And, guys like,
I'd rather see that out in Vancouver than in Toronto.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. I mean, you look at, Pedersen, who everyone knows is great, but I think you watch him in this postseason, you realize that dude like is already maybe like a top 10 player. Like, he's friggin' legit. And Quinn Hughes is fantastic as well. He's going to be up there with Makar and Heiskanen, I think, and hopefully McAvoy is this kind of next wave of franchise defensemen. But you look at how many shitty contracts that Benning has signed over that time in Vancouver. Maybe ideally, they'd find a way to offload, Louis Eriksson's contract and some of those other terrible contracts they signed. But again, you look at the way this market is. I don't know who's going to take that money unless, I think everyone this offseason is more concerned with saving money as opposed to acquiring assets. So it's like, all right, we're going to be in a flat cap for a few years. I'm not taking another pick just to take your shitty Louis Eriksson contract off the books. I don't think anyone wants to do that this offseason unless you give up an absurd amount of assets. So, if a guy like Besser's available, that would be a hefty price. You'd be looking at, I think, Carlo or someone like that. But he's a guy, though, that young, proven scorer, great shot, especially at even strength. He's a great even strength scorer, which is exactly what you need on this team. So he's a guy that kind of stands out. But I mean, there's a whole bunch of, top six guys, or even guys who are, maybe middle six that could just fit in on a second line role that would work. But I think Palmeri, in terms of just being a veteran guy that makes the most sense, he's kind of at the top of my list in terms of how he would immediately impact this team.
So he'd be near the top of mine as well. I mean, Palmeri was talked about a lot at the trade deadline. I thought the Bruins were going to get him. I mean, he just it made lots of sense, can fit in the top two lines. And he's not going to cost you a lot in a deal. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is a guy, as prolific as he's been. I don't think he surpassed the 60-point mark ever. So you're not – I mean, I don't think you're giving up a ton. You're going to give up a good amount because I think New Jersey knows
I think, first-round pick and 2021 first-round pick and, maybe Bjork and, a couple other prospects. It's not something where I think it's like, you're looking at friggin' like Studnicka or, maybe a few of these other younger top six guys where Carlo has to be the pick you're giving up, like for a veteran guy on a 1-year deal.
I think you try to not give up that first-round pick because you've had so few. I think with that route, you also try to avoid Studnicka. So if you can get them to take a guy like Beecher or a guy like Frederick, I like that so much more. I mean, again, those are first-round talents. They're first-round talents. And if you can also pair Bjork with them, maybe Zaboral or Senyshyn. I mean, granted, they're, people know what they are. I mean, maybe New Jersey thinks they can retool them. But I think for sure you're giving up a top prospect in Beecher or Frederick and Bjork and maybe someone else, maybe a second-round pick in there. But I love Palmeri. Love the player. We absolutely want him would want the Bruins to go after him. You mentioned, by the way, bad contracts for the Canucks. The Canucks signed Tyler Myers last July to that 5-year, $30 million deal. What an absolute train wreck of a deal. 30 years old. They have Louis Eriksson. Who are the other dumb contracts on the team? Roussel?
Those are ones that stand out. But yeah, there's a whole bunch that are just – it's just like the volume of how many contracts. Even ones that aren't like Louis Eriksson and Myers, the ones you stand out and you rip your hair out. But there's just other ones where you're like, that guy's not carrying his weight worth of what that cap is when you got all these younger players. And they're already in a cap crunch. They're not even paying these guys that are going to be due to get, major money next year. I know Besser's under contract. They signed him to a deal that is pretty good and should look pretty good for the next couple of years. But, when Hughes and Pedersen and these guys are up, holy shit, dude. Where's all this money going to be?
Also, Markstrom's a free agent as well.
Yeah, and I think he's gone. So
Absolutely, it has to be. I mean, they can't pay him because
yeah.
he's gonna cost a lot of money. But so some other guys, I like Besser. I think he'd be great. I think you're gonna have to give up Carlo in a deal for him, but I do think that does make you a legit. And we said this before, to make these trades, and this kind of goes for any trade, but especially this Bruins team, you got to make sure your team's getting better. You got to make sure that you are getting the best player back in the deal. I think if you trade for Brock Besser, if you sent Carlo maybe a first for a guy like Besser, I mean, I think he's good enough. Potentially a guy like Bjork in there as well. I think you're definitely getting better. Your team is getting better. You're filling a need because you have right shot defensemen. I love Carlo. I don't want to trade Carlo. I don't think anyone wants to trade Carlo, but if you're getting your team better, especially for now, so be it. I think some other interesting names. I don't know if the Canadiens would ever trade a guy to the Bruins. I can't remember the last Bruins-Canadiens move. I don't think they do that. But a Max Domi is interesting to me. Interesting. Not someone – I don't think the Bruins are ever going to get him. But he's had some big production years before. Top six guy.
You'd have a lot of guys at watering holes who are just pissed over the Bruins aren't the way they were in the 80s and stuff like that. Be very happy to get a kind of an agitator like Domi.
Yes,
into the mix.
He would fit well with the whole
old breed.
The old breed. He would fit very well with the guy standing out at Fenway Park with the hat up, throwing it onto the field.
He'd be pumped.
He would be very psyched. I think that guy is the absolute model for someone who wants Milan Lucic to be back on the Bruins.
Yes.
What's funny is that was, by the way, my favorite moment of the year. I think that guy coming out at Fenway, breaking into the stadium, no idea how he got in.
It was the most entertaining thing you saw at Fenway this year. That's for sure. I was over by Fenway yesterday when that happened. I was right by when they won the game. Like there was legitimately no one over there. It's like a ghost town, and they were playing Dirty Water, and it was like the most dystopian thing I've ever seen in my life.
You posted the video. It was so weird.
And I was hoping that I was going to be walking and just like that dude, you just see just like shuffling down like a pole and just running down like Jersey Street. Like I hope we're going to run into him, but
remember 9/11, the Boston Marathon, America.
I think the cops grabbed him before we could make a citizen's arrest. So,
well, what's funny is not to get too off topic here, but he throws the hat out on the field and then he reaches under his shirt. And it's another hat, but if you're on the field or you're an umpire or you're the cops, like you have no idea what that guy's reaching for. So that was a huge, huge bullet dodge, but it was also very funny. So I'm glad that happened.
I mean, it helps that the guy looks like he should be like working he should be with JJ and whoever the other guy was who caught the fish out in the harbor. That guy. I mean, that dude looks like he just came like straight out of Malden. So
yes, yeah, I that's funny though. Like, I wonder what went. He might have had some mental health issues, but I do wonder, like, what his.
I don't think he was totally right.
What I do wonder, like, what that thought process is. Like, oh, I'm gonna go break into Fenway Park today.
Yeah, like, it'd be funny if he was just a guy who got loaded up at like Casca Flag and I was like, "This is gonna be my moment, buddy," and just like did that. I don't think that was the case. I think the guy clearly had some problems. But if it was just like some jabroni who like wanted to break into Fenway, it would be much funnier.
It would be so good. But I do think though that I wonder what the thought process is like. Oh, I'm going to go scale the Green Monster and break into Fenway.
I saw the town once. We're going to do that. Except we're going to get arrested at the park. But
I saw the town for the first time, by the way, over quarantine. I know that's like annoying. But it's the first time. It was a great movie. Yeah. Oh, my God. That was sort of my quarantine thing was like, there's so many great movies I'd never seen, like The Social Network I'd never seen.
So fantastic movie.
Fantastic movie. And I was like, I got to watch these, and so I did. But so not to get too off topic from trades, but Domi's the guy that interests me. Another one who sort of goes into that Bruins idea, and a Bruins fan DM me on this week on Twitter, brought it up to me. A guy like Mantha, they've always kind of been, maybe Mantha would work. I'm not super high on Mantha, and I'm not super high on giving a lot for him either. So he's not someone I would go for that hard.
I don't think Detroit would give him up. I think Yzerman needs to hold on to a few of these at least building blocks. And I think Mantha still, he's half the time these guys, like even him and Larkin and a few of these other guys, are playing with dog shit. Like, that team sucks.
Yeah.
Like, that team's got nothing around him, and he's still producing pretty well. I think you keep a guy like Mantha, who's a bigger guy anyway, has got skill, and kind of let that develop. So I'd be surprised rights in the market of, selling off some of these. They probably love to trade some of these older guys they got that are eating up some cap, but I think they're not going to be moving guys like Larkin or Mantha unless it's a crazy deal, because they need to start keeping a hold of a few of these guys.
I was going to say, the Bruins have a big guy with skill. His name's Nick Ritchie, so they're fine.
Oh, yeah, of course.
So you also have – there's two other guys that interest me. There's Pablo Buchnevich, who's interesting. Mm-hmm. Might get dealt $3.25 million annually. That's palatable. I mean, I think he's a fringe – but again, you want to avoid these fringe top six guys because
that's a problem, yeah.
That's the issue. You have one with Kasha. You have one with DeBrusk. And it's like you want to get another one who's going to piss you off by generating a shit ton of scoring chances and not convert on any of them. Yeah. That seems to be the thing with the Bruins. But there is a guy who I would love to see the Bruins go after, and I think it would be worth it. And it's Johnny Gadreau. Now, obviously, but the Flames have been rumored to want to make some changes. Monahan's probably on the move. But what if they said, you know what, we can get more for a guy like Gadreau. Mm-hmm. You're going to get more money off the books with a guy like Gadreau. Bruins could be a fit. I mean, that's a guy who you have for a long time. Mm-hmm. You know he's going to put up points. You know he's going to put up at least 70 points a year. To me, I mean, that's a no-brainer. You're going to have to give up a lot. Yeah. I don't know if that's worth it. Mm-hmm. But, I mean, your future, I mean, I don't know. I guess it'd be a second liner after Marchand. So maybe it wouldn't be worth it. But if you want someone who's a legit scorer who makes you potentially get past Tampa Bay, that might be your guy.
Yeah, I mean, he's got the talent. He's got the point production. He solved the issue. He's a good 5-on-5 guy as well. He's BC guy, so, I'm kind of biased. No, I'm just kidding.
Sorry.
But I mean, I think he'd be a guy that fits just what the contract is. And I think there's you see a lot of concern for, like, the Flames wanted to get rid of Gadreau is kind of, the concern, because you hear every year that he just doesn't show up in the postseason, which I think he's more or less the fact that he's just a smaller guy. And I think if you're the top pairing, if you're the top line kind of offensive conduit, of course teams are going to put their big bodies on you and try to shut you down. So if he's with Boston, maybe, if he's a second line role, you're allowed to spread out that offense a little bit more. And, if you're going up against Tampa and, like, McDonough is handling the Bergeron line, that gives, Krejci and Gaudreau time to, generate some chances as well. So it works in that regard. Just depends on how much, how much the assets are you want to give up. And I think that's going to be the biggest, determinant there. That's why I think if you look at maybe Gaudreau, and if you're already committed to giving up a bunch of, draft capital or prospects or legitimate players, guy like NHL players, and you weigh, getting Gaudreau as opposed to maybe a guy like Besser or
Palmeri,
or a guy like Nick Ehlers over in Winnipeg, who I think's a great player, a 30-goal scorer who's under contract for a while. So I think maybe if you're willing to give that much money, you look at maybe some of these guys who are a little bit younger, who are maybe you feel a bit more a little bit better about in terms of a long-term building off of. Like, I think Gaudreau's not old, right? But I think you look at kind of his age and or his size more or less and how it fits in. Maybe you opt to go for another guy a little bit younger with still a very proven track record there. But again, Gaudreau makes your team better. I mean, why you've lost the last couple of years has been 5-on-5 scoring, and he brings it. I think it all just depends on what Calgary wants from him. And if they trade Monahan, who seems like they will, and they get a good return from him for teams that need, center depth, then maybe it's enough for them that they're like, all right, this is our big move. We've restocked. We've switched things around a little bit and go from there. But, if he's going to be out on the market this year, I think the Bruins, like most players that are going to be out there, are going to kick the tires on him.
Well, I think to get a guy like Gadreau, I think the package base would be a first-round pick, Jake DeBrusk and Johnny Beecher. I think that is like your base to Calgary, and I'm fine with that. For a guy like Gadreau, like, that is worth a first. That is worth DeBrusk. That is worth a former first. Like, that to me is completely worth it. But as you said, you can go out and get a guy like Palmeri or Ehlers or Besser and give up less and potentially get more for second line scoring. So, and also younger, which is really also very much more important. But it's funny, you know who else they should go for? They should go for like Connor McDavid or Jack Eichel or Nikita Kucherov.
Maybe, it depends, what the price is going to be. If it's like Sedniga's out there, I don't think you should do it. But
I don't think it should.
It's all about.
It should be Zaboral, Senyshyn, Vakanainen,
Nick
and
Ritchie.
A third. Yeah, Nick Ritchie.
Yeah,
and John Moore.
That would, yeah. You got to give to get in this league, so you got to be realistic about these trade packages.
That's true. So maybe not John Moore. You throw in maybe give him Connor Clifton. It's Connor Clifton, Nick Ritchie. Throw in John Moore too.
Yeah. And
Jacob Zaboral and Zach Senyshyn to the Edmonton Oilers for Connor McDavid. Who says no?
Me. I don't think you can't give up that much. That's too much cap going their way. You gotta be smart about this stuff, Evan.
You're right. It's too much. So take away.
We got a whole offseason ahead of us. We can brainstorm these things. You swung and missed on this one, but we got a lot more innings to go.
Maybe we take away John Moore. The Bruins keep John Moore. No, but so that's the problem with people with on Twitter with trades. They think they can just give up a ton of crap for greatness, and it doesn't work. So don't come at us with trading 5 piles of garbage for one really nice piece for the mantle. So it's always my favorite to see people go to the ends of the earth to try to justify why they should do a trade. And I hate trying, because what's funny is I guarantee the Bruins do a Charlie Coyle trade in the sense that they're going to go for someone you're not expecting. They're going to go for someone who's not on the trade market. They're going to, it's just going to be kind of out of the blue. They get friggin', I don't know, some, second line left winger from the, I don't know,
who wasn't even on the market. You're like, oh, I know that guy. Yeah, this is cool. But I didn't think he was available.
Like Nick Ritchie, we had no idea about. Andre Kasha was. Nick Ritchie, no idea. Charlie Coyle, no idea. I don't want to put them in the same sentence, but you know what I mean. But so it should be this should be a very trade heavy offseason for the league, not just for the Bruins, but for the league. But I think most teams realize. And by the way, the Bruins have the cap space. They have $15 million. Signed DeBrusk, signed Grizzly, which I think is very interesting. And then you have money. So it's going to be very interesting to see them actually make some moves. I'm hoping it's interesting, good moves, not like Jake Gardiner from the Hurricanes type moves.
Not trades for the sake of it where you feel like it's going to just either not be worth it or doesn't move the needle forward for your team.
Don't do lateral moves. Don't bring me another fringe right winger or fringe top 6 guy. Don't bring me another, Kasha, fine, but end it there. I'm so done with these guys who are, fringe second, third line guys. But at any rate, Connor, what would you like to plug before I let you go?
Yeah, we're going to have, as we've talked about on this podcast, it's going to be a busy offseason for the Bruins. So this weekend I broke down some free agents that the Bruins should avoid. So I think this week we'll be looking at some guys who maybe are worth, shelling out some money to. And again, not world beaters, not Petrangelos of the world, but if it's, either guys put further down on the D core, a little bit bigger, or maybe guys who fit into more of a third line role if you think you need more of a proven guy there next to Coyle. I think there's some value to be found in some of those spots. So take a look at that, looking at a few of these younger players and how they might fit into the team next year. We looked at McAvoy and Grizzly and how they look as a pairing. We've kind of sized up Anders Bjork and what he can bring next year. So we're looking at, guys like Studnicka, a guy like DeBrusk, and, what he can bring, which I think we've been talking about for a couple of years now as to what his potential is. And again, he's still only 23, so it's not like this is the player he's going to be. That's the guy who I think if you trade him, it better be worth a really good return because he's got all the makings of the guy who buries 32 goals next year and you're kicking yourself. So we'll talk about a whole bunch of that stuff over at BSJ. So subscribe at bostonsportsjournal.com. And you can follow me on Twitter at Conor Ryan _93.
Go do all of that. And for CLNS Media, I'm Evan Marinofsky. You Bruins Beat listeners, have a great rest of your week.